for Our Future, the show that goes back to help us talk about the past, but also to inform us and you about the future. If first time listener to the show, just a heads up on what we do here. We are literally chronologically going through our lives using media, but mostly movies and some soundtracks and music to talk about us, our friendship. It's a coming of age story, whatever it is. That's what we do on this podcast. If you're really going to get into it, I suggest you go back to episode 1 and listen to at least episode 1 to understand some things. And then if you find some other episodes, great. But we'd also say there's a 2-part episode called So I Married an Axe or So I Married a Podcast that focuses on the most important movie of our young lives. And there's going to be other important movies along the way, but that one is the most important. So if you haven't heard that episode and you haven't heard the first episode, we suggest you just swing on over and check those out. So today on the show, we've got a lot. We've got a stacked lineup here. There's some fun stories along the way. Tony, just real quick, how's things going, buddy?
Things are going great, buddy.
Yeah, making it work one way or the other.
And I'm happy to say that, from the looks of it, our So I Married an Axe episodes are the most listened to so far, I think.
Yeah, they are very much so.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited about that as we talk about that episode. But things are going well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I have a lot of stuff going on, but that's always how it goes. Give me 1 second.
You got so much stuff going on that you have to leave the middle of the show.
Now I had I do another podcast, and I had left the mic on the other one, and I was worried it would make a feedback loop, so I just unplugged the microphone. So for the audience that heard that gap of silence, that's exactly what happened.
That's okay.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right, so today on the show, listen, there's a fun series of events here. It starts out pretty straightforward with one of the most iconic films ever made. It's not necessarily the birth of Matthew McConaughey, but I would argue it's probably the one that really launched him into stardom, and that's going to be All Right, All Right, All Right.
It's pretty big. People haven't heard that line before. This is the movie where it comes from.
That's exactly right.
I promise you nobody says it that hasn't seen this movie. So
it's so funny because this movie ends up being really quotable for us, and I still hear men of my generation certainly saying, like, the thing is, what is it? The older I get, the younger they stay, or whatever the line is. It's cringy, but it's so funny. It's loaded. It's loaded with so many lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
And of course, we're talking about Dazed and Confused.
There we go. So let's talk about that. I don't think I saw this in theaters. This is definitely a VHS cult classic for me. In the sense that I don't remember seeing it in theaters.
No, and it does come out September 24th of 1993 in theaters, and it was not by any means a huge hit. It was a several $1 million movie, which was a lot for Richard Linklater at the time. He had gotten like $7 million budget to do this movie after Slacker, which was like a smaller hit for him. And so they did this movie, which is similar with the big ensemble cast and about high school life and stuff like that. But at the same time, very different. And this was a movie that I didn't see in theaters either. I saw this movie on VHS as well.
It's interesting, though, because now, if you think about it, Linklater's still around. He still makes, he has more money now in a lot of his films. But the interesting side of this is early on. This is when we start to see the birth of, in my opinion, this is when we start to see the birth of the indie, the guy who makes a purely independent film getting transitioned into a studio title relationship. And you're going to see this throughout the 90s. The further we go into the 90s, you're going to see more and more of this. You'll see it with Jon Favreau. You'll see it with other people. This is the beginning. Even arguably Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were indie guys that ended up getting a studio budget. So this is sort of that Gus Van Sant, I think, directed that, if I'm not mistaken, but whatever that movie is, I can't think of it. The math one. Thank you. Good Will Hunting. Smart people movie. Dumb guy. But anyway, so Linklater getting this opportunity, it's kind of the birth of that. So if you know about that, you can kind of see this trend emerge specifically as we get further into the 90s, certainly when indie film really starts to take off, which is a fascinating take to me on the fact of like, it's an interesting cycle. We had gone through the 80s of all the kind of over the top. There was a lot of B movies, but it was like everything was trying to just be this bigger than life scenario. And then yet in the 90s, we get back to smaller movies from smaller directors that end up leading to bigger projects for them. Very similar to 70s cinema when you get into the avant-garde side of things and guys doing crazy stuff with experimental camera technology, and believe it or not, handheld was not really a thing until the 70s. So this is it's cool to see that this resurgence in film history, this is just an important time of our lives. All right. So Dazed and Confused, Linkletter, incredible cast. It's got to be one of the most loaded cast in history.
To me, and I was thinking about this as we were doing the show too, but to me, it's one of the best casts that's ever been assembled. I mean, that's obviously my own opinion, but it's pretty loaded. I mean, you've got Jason London and Ben Affleck, Mila Jovovich, Cole Hauser, Parker Posey, Adam Goldberg, Matthew McConaughey, as you said, Nikki Katt, Joey Lauren Adams, Rory Cochrane, Marissa Ricci. I mean, it's a loaded cast, and they've all got their own unique personalities. And there's a lot of other cast members in this. It's loaded, and they've all got unique personalities. They've all got their unique sayings. They've all got their unique styles. And Linklater did such a great job of melding that all together in this movie. I love it so much. And the soundtrack's amazing. Everything's amazing.
It is amazing. It's great. And the funny thing about it is, like, I still remember, I can see the artwork of the soundtrack, that I can see the CD artwork. It's one of those that lives on forever. But the other side of it that I find fascinating is that the era in which the film takes place didn't matter to us because we just identified with all these characters so well. Because if I'm not mistaken, it takes place in the 70s. So is that right? It's 70s.
6, which is when I was born.
Right. So
there, but that's okay.
Yeah, there you did. That's all right, because you're lower middle 40s, lower middle upper 40s, lower middle upper, whatever we said that day. But point is like, it didn't matter that it took place. This is what's so great about the movie. It didn't matter to us that it was in the 70s. We still related to each one of those characters. Like, I know that we had, there's a guy's named Slater, and that was Jonathan Green. We all called Jonathan Green. Yeah.
Yep. Jonathan Green, who was a good buddy of ours, and I actually see this movie at his house because I have a sleepover where I over there, and it's just him and I, and we watched this movie. And he had rented it. We were really excited about it. I was like, man, I didn't see that in theaters. And he's like, I didn't see it in theaters either. And we both watched it. And I remember as this movie's going on, I looked at him and I said, man, you are a lot like Rory Cochrane's Slater character. I mean, from the way he acts to the way he dresses, all the way down to the hat being turned back. I mean, it was just everything about that character. He has a chain wallet. Everything about that character was Jonathan Green. And he embraced it. It was not insulting to him that this ultra stoned out character, because he's the most stoned out character in the entire film, and he loved it. He embraced the fact that this was like him, and awesome. It was a lot of fun. We had a great time with that sleepover, just watching this movie, and me thinking at the time, man, this is a classic film too. This is going to be one that's going to be around for a long time.
And we've inadvertently introduced a new character. So for those that we've maybe have mentioned him before, but Jonathan was a friend of mine from middle school. We went to middle school together. We got to be very close friends. But what I remember most about Johnny is that I mean, I've got all kinds of terrible stories, but I'll tell the good ones. One of the things about Johnny that I remember really well, especially as a kid, is he was always really into movies. Like him and his family, very similar to Tony's family, always went to go see movies, or they always rented a bunch of movies from Farmore. Johnny was also a Farmore guy. So there was always a plethora of movies. Some stuff I saw over there that I probably wouldn't have been allowed to rent at home. And nothing obviously adult, but like I remember seeing Aliens. I'd never seen the movie Aliens until I spent the night with him, and of course loved it because it was like an action movie. Die Hard 2 I watched with Jonathan. I just remember a lot of that stuff. So Johnny he'll come up again later on. He becomes a core part of our group, but Jonathan did see. We saw a lot of movies together, and obviously Tony spent the night and saw Dazed and Confused with them. You were so. What's interesting about that movie though is again I remember the peer group. All of us sort of identified with somebody, and this wouldn't occur again really in an ensemble type scenario that I can remember for us all relating to until you get somewhere like Empire Records. So it's a
That's
while before. Yeah,
yeah, just another Rory Cochrane movie.
yeah. Roy Cochran just doing his thing.
Yeah, no,
But
I
yeah,
agree.
so Daisy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And also another movie that has an amazing soundtrack.
yeah. Let's talk about that because it was an interesting thing. I still listen to a lot of. I listen to probably more classic rock now, and I don't mean classic rock in being '90s music is technically classic rock. I mean like real classic rock, like late '60s, early '70s. That I love that era of music. I feel like it sounds better, and there's a lot to it that I really enjoy. But this soundtrack had a lot of different stuff on it. I mean, it was a lot of stuff. Wasn't the Soup Dragons on the soundtrack?
It's loaded, man. I mean, this is a soundtrack that I own on CD, so it's pretty awesome. But Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo by
Oh
Rick
yeah,
Derringer opens up the whole soundtrack, and you got Slow Ride by Foghat, School's Out by Alice Cooper, Jim Dandy by Black Oak, Arkansas, Tush by ZZ Top, Love Hurts by Nazareth, Stranglehold by Ted Nugent, Cherry Bomb by the Runaways, Fox on the Run by Sweet, Low Rider by War, Tuesday's Gone by Leonard Skinner, Highway Star by Deep Purple, Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss, and Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Pretty iconic songs, top to bottom.
yeah. Listen, I there's a bunch of those. So I literally within 3 days of us having this conversation just got on this Ted Nugent kick, and I just was jamming on Stranglehold. I that song is solid, but more importantly, Alice Cooper School's Out because of this movie. Every summer, right before my kids, the last day of school, I absolutely 100% play that song, and they know the words now. They know the chorus, and they sing it, and they sing it loud, and we have the windows down because it's normally still fairly good weather. And when we do it, we leave the parking lot, and I make sure to pick them up every time the last day of school so we can listen to Alice Cooper's School's Out. Just straight up tradition. It'll end at some point when my kids drive, but maybe they'll carry it on. But yeah, great soundtrack, one of the best of all time for sure.
There was even another CD that was even released because that's a sampling of the songs that are in this movie. It's not even all of them. I mean, there was another one that was like Free Ride by Edgar Winter, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Alice Cooper, Living in the USA by Steve Miller Band, Never Been Any Reason by Head East, Why Can't We Be Friends by War, Summer Breeze by Seals and Croft, Right Place, Wrong Time by Dr. John, Bolognese by ZZ Top, of course, Lord Have Mercy on My Soul by Black Oak, Arkansas, I Just Want to Make Love to You by Foghat, Show Me the Way by Peter Frampton, and Do You Feel Like We Do by Peter Frampton. So it's again, those are all songs that are used in big spots in this movie, and Linklater does a great job of placing them in this movie. So the soundtrack is very important. As a matter of fact, I know at one point it was 1/10, 10% of the budget of this film.
I was literally just about to ask you, what do you? That is so many big songs. Those are not B
Huge.
sides from artists. Those are top 10 Billboard top 10 songs from each one of those artists. That is a tremendous amount of money. That's a
It's a lot.
tremendous amount.
So they originally were. I know they originally had set aside 10% of the budget just for the music, and then the studio had talked him out of like lower the budget because he said, well, you do that mostly in post anyway, and then you raise the budget there, and of course they never raised the budget again, but they ended up with all the songs. So it was kind of a crazy thing, but yeah, I mean, really well placed. I mean, I can still see in my mind Summer Breeze, Seals and Crofts with
Mm-hmm.
those two making out on the blanket right before he gets busted at his house, as he's walking in and stuff like that. It's really the songs are iconic, and it's kind of like the TV show Wonder
Wonder
Years.
Years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wonder with use of music in this era of time frame is really amazing.
So interesting part about that when Tony brings up Wonder Years, and I can't remember if we've ever talked about it on the show before, but the problem with Wonder Years and the reason why it was so limited in syndication and certainly on box set and any kind of other release was because of the music licensing.
Yeah.
Because it was so expensive to do so. What I find fascinating is that often an overlooked role in the film world, and it is a post-production based role, but an overlooked role is a music supervisor. And having worked with a couple of them, first off, they're geniuses because what they do, I don't know if they work on commission or not. I have no idea how their pay structure is. I know what I paid for several of them. Is that they go through, and I can take a movie called Convergence that Tony and I made. We wanted to use a very specific song. I've talked about Filter before, and they wanted both sides of the song, and it was like $75,000. We couldn't afford it. And then I was like, I need another iconic '90s song, and we settled with Santa Monica. And is it Santa Monica? It is Santa Monica, right? I don't remember now. Anyway, we settled on a '90s song. It's Everclear did the song. But what was interesting is our music supervisor was able to secure us not the original version of the song, the original recording, because that was too expensive, but he found a new recording of that song, meaning Everclear had gone back into the studio and re-recorded it, which made it affordable for us to use that track. So music soups are very, very, I mean, they're the most brutal negotiators. They're fantastic. They're the best advocates in the world, and no one ever talks about them. But whoever the music soup is on this movie, they deserve a freaking Oscar because they were able to pull off for a $7 million movie to have this kind of soundtrack. In today's terms, would never happen. This is just not going to happen. But it's amazing that they did it for such a low budget, lower budget indie film. Of course, that's not that low budget then, but still not a huge budget. So great movie, great soundtrack. Even more Dazed and Confused, I think the second one was called. The second soundtrack was called or something like that. It was something fun. Uh-oh. Did Tony freeze? He's got the frozen look on his face right now. Anybody at home wonders why you're not hearing Tony? We don't know why we're not hearing Tony. I think he got a text message while we were recording. Well, now he's frozen. Frozen in time with Tony. Uh-oh. You back?
Yep. I had a phone call came and got me. So
Jacked you all up, huh?
yeah. Yep. Very weird.
Okay. Well, I have a marker there, so I can just pull that chunk out. So,
I don't know what you're
so that's, yeah, it's fine. I finished my sentence. I'll just kick us back into moving on to the next piece.
Sounds good.
All right, so that's Dazed and Confused. Now here we are. It's still September 24th. There's a couple of movies that come out. Some of these have good memories about and all this stuff, and there's some interesting choices made. So the next one on the list, of course, is The Good Son, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Macaulay Culkin in a horror film. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of plays as like a horror thriller type movie, but yeah, Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood and David Morse. It's really good cast again. I mean, and of course, it's a massive departure for Macaulay Culkin because he's in the Home Alone movies and Uncle Buck and Richie Rich and stuff like that, and all of a sudden here he comes in a horror movie, kind of a horror movie,
Right.
more of a thriller,
Yeah, right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Elijah Wood, we all kind of knew was going to end up being this indie darling type guy anyway. Like he always had different kind of choices in his castings, but this one is it's dark. It's a dark movie. It's got a lot to it. It's a heavy piece. What do you remember about it? I remember seeing it, but I don't remember. I definitely didn't see it in theaters.
I saw it at Carmike 10, which and I was pretty excited about it because I wanted to see what Macaulay Culkin would do with this role. But yeah, I mean, it's Elijah Wood's character Mark. He moves. His mom passes away, and then his dad's going on a long business trip for like the winter break, and so he moves him to his aunt and uncle's house. And they have two kids, and they have a daughter, and then they have a son who's played by Macaulay Culkin. And then, of course, upon being there for a little bit of time, starts to realize that Macaulay's got these really psychological issues, a lot of psychological problems, and psychotic behavior, and is fixated on death and stuff like that. And then, of course, all the hijinks starts where he starts to do all these psychotic things. So it eventually pits the two boys kind of against each other, and that whole realm. And Elijah Wood's trying to help other characters in the movie, and that whole thing. So yeah, it's a good movie, and I do recommend it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those that in today's terms would be maybe given a side eye to, but it's still like it's edgy in a way of like getting away with kind of the things that happen in that movie without any spoilers. If you've never seen it, it is definitely an interesting thriller. There's something about it that's very interesting. That stacks up against one of. If I remember you seeing this movie and being I do remember this. I just remember it being on your list, if I'm not mistaken. And I always enjoy this game where if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But this is The Program is on there, and I believe that's got James Caan in it, if I'm not mistaken. Did I get this one wrong?
Halle Berry, Omar Epps, Craig Schaefer, Christy Swanson, another Joey Lauren Adams film. She was in Dazed and Confused. He's in this as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a good movie, man.
So it's a football-based movie. I don't remember it. I remember the movie existing because obviously I knew you had James Caan, but I don't remember the movie. Is it pro football or college football? I don't remember any of that.
College football. Yeah, so it's about
Okay.
this college team, and it kind of. I mean, I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to be really honest about it. They don't paint college football in a very positive light in this film by any means, but because they go through all the stuff that can happen to some of these players, which is like steroids and alcohol and drugs and things like that, and of course all the hijinks that happens on a team setting. Some of it's true and some of it's fabricated, but yeah, it was a really good movie, and I mean, again, good soundtrack here as well. Great cast. And I really enjoyed it. I saw it multiple times at the theater, actually. I saw it at Carmike 10, and then I'd see it at Movies 10. I'd go to the Dollar Theater and check it out again. And, yeah, it was, I would, of course, it's 1993, and football is pretty much my thing, and still is, but it's definitely my
Yeah,
thing.
listen, I was going to say there's a story that comes out of this, and I don't remember exactly. I'm sure Tony will tell us what year. I think it was in the past, but Tony is a Nebraska fan. And there was no, it wasn't Nebraska. It was Boston College. Was it Nebraska playing Boston College or was it Notre Dame playing Boston College when I called?
That's going to be a couple of years from now.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't happened yet. We'll get to it, but you did call, but it's Notre Dame versus Ohio State.
Oh, that's even worse because
Yeah.
Dale Boyd listens to this show and he's a Buckeyes fan. If I give him this ammunition, oh boy. So long story short, we'll get to it one day and maybe we'll have more about the story. But I basically called Tony and said at halftime, it's over. Notre Dame's destroying it. And then Notre Dame went on to lose. Like they literally just lost the game.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll tell you the rest of the results. You just got to wait a few more episodes to get to it. That also led to an apology gift of a Notre Braska hat that came out of this.
It's going to be pretty
also part of the also same scenario. But yes, college football is very much part of his life. I mean, I was watching Alabama. I mean, that's I watched Alabama from time to time. That's coming off of Gene Stallings' 92 win, but whatever. Anyway, long story short, there it is. That's The Program. I have not seen it. I might go back and watch it. I'm a little scared that if I watch it now, how much do you think it affects like the NIL deals and that sort of dynamic that we have now? Did they talk about like the underground payments and all that stuff?
They talk about that kind of stuff. I mean, like you can. I mean, they don't obviously talk about NIL because that's kind of a different.
Right.
But they talk about payments and things like that, and paying athletes and families and stuff like that. So they do touch on that in this movie. One of the things I wanted to bring up about this movie that I don't think people remember at all is the controversy when this movie came out, because there was a scene where 3 players lay in the middle of the road.
That's right. It's a big deal.
And so there's the players lay in the middle of the road, and they let these cars pass them on both sides, and it's supposed to be kind of like this stunt. and of course nobody's harmed when the movie is it's done in the movie, but 3 or 4 people tried to do it in real life, and one of them got killed doing it. So that scene got completely ripped from this movie altogether. It was taken out of It was in the trailers originally. It got taken out of the trailers. It got taken out of the movie. I saw it because it's in the original movie when you see it in theaters, but it's not in any DVDs you buy unless you buy like the Tokyo versions or something that's overseas. It's in a couple of those. Outside of that, you'd have to maybe look for it on the internet because it's not in any program video or in any DVD that you can buy these days.
Yeah, I watched a video. I think it was Mojo put it out, or one of those companies put it out, and it was a video on like scenes that didn't make the final cut after they've been released,
Right.
and that's the number one. That's the number one scene because someone died from the stunt, right?
Yeah.
Someone died trying to perform what they did. But yeah, you can find it on the internet because, like I said, I saw the clip of it, that's crazy. I totally forgot about that.
Oh, these movies came out 31 years ago. So
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. That leads us, and I used to know his name, and I know you know it because you have it in front of you, but I used to know the guy's name. But we're getting into Warlock, the Armageddon, and I don't know if this is Warlock 3 or 4. It could even be Warlock 5 or 6. I'm
No,
not totally sure.
I think you had 2. There was only 2.
Oh, I'm thinking of what's the other one that was similar? Not Wishmaster. Is it Wishmaster?
Wishmaster. There's a lot more of those. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm confusing over. All right, so Warlock, the Armageddon is the sequel to Warlock, the first one.
It's not as good as the original. The original is amazing. I mean, the original Warlock is incredible. It really is.
Yeah.
I saw that movie in theaters, the original one, and was happy to do so because I thought the trailer for the original Warlock is incredible. And then when you watch the movie, it's pretty amazing. It's got Julian Sands, and he's
Julian Sands, there we go.
playing the Warlock, and then Richard E. Grant is in the original. This is a sequel by name only, and it's done because the first one was like a $15 million movie. It's not, it's a pretty big budget, for 1989 for that type of film, and it did okay, but it did a lot better in the secondary markets where it became a hit there. But this one's like a $3 million movie. It did like 4 million and did good in secondary markets. But I worked with Julian Sands on a movie called The Scoundrel's Wife.
That's right.
And he was an absolutely wonderful guy. We lost him way too soon when he went on a hike and was missing, and they found him.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I like Julian Sands. I mean, I really did. I liked. He would show up in especially in the straight to video market. He showed up in quite a few movies, and I always appreciate him because he's a good actor that even was in some of these like quirkier movies, but he was really still good in the roles that he played. But as you said, this is a departure from that.
He has some movies, man. I mean, it was like he did Boxing Helena. It was like crazy film. I mean, he was not afraid to take risks with his movies, and even Warlock to me is kind of a risky film in some ways. But yeah, he was that kind of actor for sure, and didn't apologize for it by any means.
Yeah, and that's good. We need that kind of content to come out from time to time. It makes it fun. I saw a modern film. If you want to talk about a risky endeavor, I recently finished the film The Substance, starring Demi Moore. I don't know if you've seen this movie. Oh dear Lord, I don't know if I can recommend it because it is. You've got to be okay with body horror. You got to be 100% okay with body horror. But that movie is an example of someone making an art film that makes a statement, entertains you, and terrifies you and disturbs you all in one fell swoop. I mean, it is. That movie is insanity. It is just insanity.
No, it's a pretty wild ride, but really good cast in that one as well. Demi Moore and I was about to say Randy Quaid, but Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, and then the girl is somebody's daughter. Is that Marlee Matlin's daughter or somebody like that? Who's the? I don't want to say anything, but the girl.
Yeah, go into it, but yeah.
I can't suggest the movie. I can just tell you that if you're gonna watch it, if you decide to watch The Substance, I would just say if you want to get into bold cinema for a little modern take on, that's what we do on the shows. We give you thoughts on everything. I would go into it knowing nothing. I think if you know nothing, you're in for one of the wildest rides you'll ever experience in your entire life. I swear to you, it's bananas. I can't say that it's good bananas. I'm just saying it's bananas. So
Yeah.
hope you like bananas.
That's a new movie. That's not from
Yeah,
night.
that's correct.
That's a brand.
Correct. That's a modern film. All right. So then we go into A Bronx Tale, which is a classic. I think, I feel like that movie is probably on a lot of, not just New Yorkers. I feel like that movie's on a lot of people's list. And it may be even something that's on their list that they don't remember, because it feels like that movie just has a really good heart to it. And it's been a while since I've seen it, but I just remember it having a good emotional stake. Am I correct on that assessment?
Absolutely. So this was a movie. I was a huge Robert De Niro. I still love Robert De Niro, but I mean, he was amazing to me back in this era. And he directs this film, and it's like his first directing job. And Chaz Palminteri does the screenplay, and he's outstanding in this film. And it was a movie at the time that because I love mob movies and things like that. I love that style. But this was a movie I was like, well, De Niro directs it, but he's not going to be in it a ton. I knew that right away, and so I wasn't absolutely rushing to the theater to see it because of that. And I was completely wrong. He's amazing in the film, and Lilo Brancato Jr., who has a lot of legal issues down the road, but he's amazing as his son. And Chaz Palminteri is outstanding, and the film has got a lot of heart. You're absolutely correct. I love the use of racial tensions in the neighborhoods, and the use of interracial relationship to kind of bring them out. All that stuff is in the film, and you get to a lot of familiar faces. There's some cameos. It's a highly recommended film, especially if you're into those types of movies. I wouldn't say it's not Goodfellas. It's not anything. It's different than all those films because it's dealing with more like a family atmosphere. But
Right.
But definitely something I would highly recommend if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a classic, and I think it's a really good movie. It's solid. So that rounds us out of that. So it takes us to I got to be honest with you. This next movie, I don't remember what my state was when we saw it as young men. Maybe I liked it, maybe I didn't. I'm sure you remember. But I will tell you now that I know that, again, shout out to Dale who listens to this podcast. We have both said lines from Cool Runnings to each other before we go ride our mountain bikes together. It has just been part of our lexicon. It's been a part of it. So we go see this together. We go see Cool Runnings. You got a Dougie Fresh movie with John Candy. What can go wrong? Nothing can go wrong.
Yeah, it's about the Jamaican bobsled team, of course. If anybody know this movie by now, it's pretty iconic. And anytime the Winter Olympics come around, they always talk about the Jamaican bobsled team. They still do. And anytime they're there and they've qualified, they still talk about this movie. So this is where it all comes from, and this is where it all stems from. And it is based on a true story. So this actually did happen. But anyway, yeah, this was
you got another. Okay.
This was a great movie.
Go ahead.
Starring John Candy, of course, and like you said, Dougie Doug, but Leon as well, who's really great in this, is awesome. And I worked with John Turteltaub, who directed this movie.
I forgot this was a Turteltaub film. I forgot.
And
yeah,
he when I did Jericho, he was very much hands on. So I worked with him pretty much every day that I was doing that show for CBS. But really nice guy, and he does direct this film, and it's quite amazing. You and I saw this one together at Carmike 10, and you did love it at the time. So
okay, good, because you never know with me. It's always a crapshoot. Like if you never know, I was a moody teenager, so you never know what you're going to get from me.
It's a pretty,
but it's still, yeah, it's funny. It's good.
And it's got a lot of heart too. And we were talking about Bronx Tale and how much heart that movie has, and this one's got a lot of it too. And John Candy's absolutely amazing. And to me, this is one of his last really, really, really big roles. He's going to release a couple stuff after he passes away the next year, but this is his last. To me, it's really his kind of last iconic big role.
Yeah, I absolutely adore this movie. Like I said, we've referenced it multiple times. We've said different stuff about it. It's always something important to bring up. Now let's. I can. I'm gonna segue it. I'm gonna try it. I can say that I love Cool Runnings, and I think it's a flawless film without malice. No, how's that one?
Ah,
That's
nice.
all right. Anyway, the next tee up is the movie Malice. I know that I've seen this film. I remember the artwork on the film, but I don't remember anything about it. For some reason in my brain, I can see what's the Kidman, Nicole Kidman, but that may not even be right. Um,
Oh, that's right, Nicole Kidman, and Alec Baldwin and Bill Pullman. Yeah, that's kind of the main three. Beam Newworth from Cheers, who played Lilith, of
yep.
course, he's in this movie as well.
I don't remember anything about it. You talked about seeing it in a hotel room. Obviously, you guys must with your mom. Y'all were traveling, but I don't know anything. I don't know any. I don't remember it at all. Is it a medical thriller?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is Nicole Kidman and Bill Pullman are a married couple who want to have a baby, and she goes through a medical emergency as they're trying to have a child, and um, she has her ovaries pulled out. Anyway, it's a whole thing that happens during the procedure, and they end up in this malpractice suit with Alec Baldwin and this whole situation. And it turns out it's more of a turnabout, and she's actually with Alec Baldwin, and this whole deal. And I don't want to ruin the whole surprise because I think this is a very underrated film, and I don't think a lot of people have always seen it. So I really kind of want to keep the thriller aspect there, and don't want to ruin
Okay.
it, even though it's 31 years old. I get it, but sometimes we recommend movies on this show that I don't think people have seen, and I try not to completely spoil them. So that's kind of the gist of it. Is a lot. It's a thriller. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it when I was on vacation. We were in Disney, and my mom and I used to tantalize you with these things in movie in when you went in the hotel rooms. They'd have like this big box up on the top of the television, and there would be this advertisement and this like little pamphlet that would have all these pay-per-view movies that you could buy inside your hotel room. And a lot of them were just getting out of theaters, or maybe at the end of their theatrical runs, and you could watch these movies in your hotel room. And this is one of those films we decided on that at that time, because we were always big into mom and I have always been big into like thrillers and things like that. We like that genre, and so we liked the cast of this movie, and so we saw it. And also, it's written by Aaron Sorkin, and he does write
Ooh.
does write good stuff.
Yeah. In case anybody doesn't know who Aaron Sorkin is, his biggest television outing. He's done tons of movies, but his biggest television is The West Wing, which is I think most people know that show. I mean, he's legendarily considered one of the better writers on earth. I think he even has a presidential award for art. If I remember correctly, they give it like a congressional honor for art, and Aaron Sorkin has it, which is fascinating to me because as well as that movie's written, the next movie arguably has some of the most questionable scenes ever devised, and that's going to be the seashells. And I'm going to give anybody a second that knows what the seashells are. This is a movie where there's still questions about the seashells.
There's still questions about this. I think there's still questions about the seashells.
We even asked that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. You got to see the opening scene of this movie happen in real time, and I'm saving it because didn't you see this happen in real time? Weren't you in?
My dad, of course, he has his own computer. He has his own service company, services computers. But at the time, he worked for QMS in Mobile, and they had offices all over the country and world. And so we were doing a road trip in Los Angeles, and we had flown out there, and we were going to do Los Angeles and San Diego and all these places, and we were also going to a lot of Cardinals games because they were on a West Coast swing. And we pull up into his parking lot of this office building, which housed where he needed to go, and we're all together. It's him and it's mom and everybody's there, and we're getting ready to go to a baseball game. But we pull up in there so he can do some business, and right across the street, inexplicably, we have no real. It's just coincidental. They're shooting the movie Demolition Man.
There we go.
It's literally in the same parking lot right across the way, and they're shooting the scene where Wesley Snipes puts those flares, those guns, those you know what I'm talking about, those flare gun things
Yeah.
into the cars and blows them up. And so
Right.
yeah, they're filming that scene, and we got to see it. So it was kind of cool. So I knew this movie was coming out because I had seen it actually being made long
And
before.
what's funny is, yeah, but what's crazy to me is that's in a time frame where, because cell phones didn't have really camera phones or anything to worry about, they didn't block off the whole street where you couldn't see it. Nowadays, they would have blocked off that building with a drape or something. So if you did park in there, they get a lot more precious sometimes. I mean, sometimes they don't, but they get a lot more precious with stuff because that's a big scene in the movie where you have this big moment with Wesley Snipes and such. I think it's fascinating because Demolition Man, to this day, is still one of my all-time favorite science fiction movies, because not only is it hilarious, it's quotable. There's a tremendous amount of like crazy references in it. There's the whole idea of the Taco Bell restaurant wars and the fast food wars, and Taco Bell is the only restaurant they have in the future. There's so much crazy stuff that makes the movie very comical, but at the same time, it has some incredibly well done action sequences, just way over the top, just really cool stuff. And to this day, it's still one of my all time favorite action films.
Yeah, I mean, this
Or
is
sci-fi
goes
films.
into the same genre. It just kind of goes into the same category as, when I talk about guys like Bruce Willis, I don't always talk about Die Hard. I talk about movies like Striking Distance. When you talk about Sylvester Stallone, a lot of people want to talk about Rambo. A lot of people want to talk about Rocky, and I get it. Those are huge franchises and Expendables and all that stuff. But these are the types of movies I really like involving these guys, because it's kind of a departure and something different that they're putting out there that's not part of a massive franchise. And I thought Demolition Man was absolutely exceptional. I mean, the cast is amazing, from top to bottom, really. I mean, you got Sly Stallone and Wesley Snipes and Sandra Bullock before she really starts blowing up, and Nigel Hawthorne, Ben Bratt, Dennis Leary, Bill Cobbs. I mean, and you get a little cameo by Rob Schneider, uncredited, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing cast, and like you said, great action movie. And we saw this together as well at Carmike 10 when we went with Jonathan Green and the other Jonathan Howard. That's a new character too. You have to explain him.
Yeah, so Jonathan Howard was one of my oldest friends, in terms of I went all the way from K5 through middle school with Jonathan, and then we departed ways at middle school. He went to, or at the end of middle school for high school. But I stayed friends with him, and we've actually talked about Jonathan before, because he's around for a little bit and he disappears and comes back. He's kind of a rotating. He's in a, what is it called when you're he's a co-star. He just comes and goes for certain episodes, whereas Johnny Green was a
Recurring
regular.
role.
Recurring role. Thank you. Jonathan Howard's a recurring role. Jonathan Green's an actual cast member at this point. But yeah, that movie is a perfect example of the kind of stuff. If you were to, if So Married and Axe Murder is one example of the stuff me and Tony loved, Demolition Man is the other side of that coin, because that's the kind of stuff. It was almost like a buddy action film in some ways, but it's the kind of movie that we really liked seeing that kind of stuff a lot. And that movie is hands down one of my all time favorites still to this day.
I think it's great.
Interesting. Neil.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I said I think it's just an amazing movie. I mean, even just taking out the fact that it's a Sly Stallone action movie, I just everything about it, the way it's written, and there's a lot of good lines in that movie too, and it's really funny. I mean, it's an action movie, but it's a lot of comedy in it too. And like you said, the seashells thing, but there's a lot of funny stuff, like even how you're having sex in that time frame with the
Yeah,
headsets and the VR and stuff like that. I mean, you can see a lot of that stuff plays now, even a little bit. Um,
yeah.
with some people, but it's a fun movie, and it's done in especially in 1993. It's done in a way that few movies had been done.
Oh, for sure. And so later on in our careers, we would actually get to work with the production designer of that movie, a gentleman named David L. Snyder, uh, and we got to ask him. I asked him. I was like, "Dude, I got to know about the seashells. I just got to know." And I don't remember the exact answer he gave me 100%. I think he said there is no answer. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it's almost a gag that occurred because he had the art director just place him in there, and they just kind of riffed on it and came up with this idea. So if I'm not mistaken, I think it's actually just like a gag that happened that they caught, and then they just kept it in and let it become a running joke. But if you look at the production design of that, David did a fantastic job of. I mean, it feels like LA of the future. There's electric cars. I mean, he did a great job because it's ironically, I think, set in 19. Well, the first part's in 99, and then I think the second part's in 2032 or something, or
It,
2024.
you actually got it right. 2032. You nailed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty impressive.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're only 8 ways away, 8 years away, so I'm waiting for the fast food wars and for them to ban cussing because God knows I'll get so many of those tickets for cursing. Anyway, if you've never seen the movie Demolition Man, sit back and relax. I'm talking about get the biggest bowl of popcorn you can. Get you a nice soda full of caffeine, just full of caffeine, or not, or not if you're Tony.
Any of this right now. I can't have any of the caffeine. You can have the popcorn. You can't have the caffeine.
But you got to have the biggest bowl of popcorn and the biggest soda you can, and you need to sit down and enjoy one of the best blockbuster popcorn movies ever made in the history of cinema. Absolutely love every second of it. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, I think it's 100% worth it, and it's a lot of fun.
Has a good song too. Sting does the title song for this movie, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, it's interesting because it goes back to the same thing he had done for Lethal Weapon 3, which was Sting, Eric Clapton, and they did the title song for that as well, and Michael Kamen. So it's fun to see. It's a good movie. It's just so different. It's so different. If you've never seen it, you're going to miss out on a ton of fun. Now, that brings us to what I think this week. I think the Tony's picks this week are very difficult. I feel like this is one of the hardest ones because there's a lot of good movies in here that because it's September, we've talked, and into October, we've talked about this before. A lot of times this is a slower release schedule, but if you look at the list of these movies, I mean, you could almost say see them all, which is copping out because we expect only one or two from you, maybe three.
Right.
But
Well,
what are your picks here? Because this is a tough one.
it's hard to say because once again, I can never tell. I have a lot of conversations, as you know. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people involving movies, and one of the things I love to ask, especially especially females, is I like to ask, "What are your three favorite movies?" And I ask this question a lot as an icebreaker for just meeting people in life, and I get a lot of feedback. And sometimes I get more than three, and sometimes I get less. And I have to pull the other ones out of them. Oh, but that's okay. And so I try to figure out what people have seen and have they seen Dazed and Confused. Because if you haven't seen Dazed and Confused, that is a must-see film. It's literally a classic movie and regarded as probably one of the best high school comedies ever made. So that's a movie that needs to be seen. So that would be a pick. If you haven't seen Dazed and Confused, that's a movie you must see. If you have never seen Demolition Man, for whatever ridiculous reason, because it was a big budget, Sylvester Stallone, Wesley Snipes, who was massive at the time, it's one of their big movies, that's a movie you should see because it's really quite amazing. Cool Runnings. If for some reason you haven't seen that movie, that's a must see. Because if you're a John Candy guy like we both were, you got to see Cool Runnings. But a movie that I would say I would definitely check out A Bronx Tale without question. Because to me, A Bronx Tale, um, I think most people liked Goodfellas, and I know you didn't like The Godfather, but a lot of people like those types of films. And this kind of is a departure from it, but also plays in the same genre. But it has a lot more heart than a lot of those movies, even. And because of family element and uh, everything that's happening in the neighborhood and everything else. So I would definitely highly recommend A Bronx Tale. But yeah, like you said, pretty loaded list this week, and it's not gonna change much because I mean, when we do our next episode, it's really, really, really loaded because we're getting into my birthday, and the two movies that are going to get released on my birthday are A Nightmare Before Christmas and Rudy, the movie that's literally about Notre Dame football that I have watched probably 250 times.
You
And
don't,
Judgment
you've
Night coming out a week after that.
right. So next
Most
next
iconic
week,
soundtrack of all time.
right. So next week has a ton of dialogue in it. There's a ton of stories about that because there's fun little things and quirks and other elements. Just about Rudy, I've got things for days on that. Just having grown up with someone who's a Rudy obsessee, there's a lot. So next week is loaded. The soundtrack alone, that dialogue is powerful when we start getting into that because it's a crazy one and it really is groundbreaking, and I think people might not realize why, and I'll leave that be the tease. But that soundtrack ends up changing music forever. And whether you like it or not, it's going to change music forever.
And I'm sure there's people who have never heard the soundtrack because
Right.
people's not gonna. It's not everyone's gonna want to hear it, because it's pretty heavy and it involves a lot of metal and it involves a lot of rap. So a lot of people don't like those genres. So I get it, but it's still very iconic.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that in detail and go through all that stuff. All right. So we've got Tony's pick for the week. Even though all these movies are applicable, we're gonna say it's A Bronx Tale, and I agree with that. I think that's the wise call there because if you haven't seen some of these other movies are huge cult wise, but if you haven't seen any of those, go check them out. As always, if you like what you're listening to, you can throw comments inside of Spotify. We're up on YouTube. And look, we would love some more likes on YouTube, or subscribes rather. If you subscribe, you can turn the notification bell off if you'd like to listen on their favorite podcast. But we are trying to get a little more of a following on YouTube because it does help us out just in terms of being able to. It's simple things like I can't change a certain title yet, and there's some playlist stuff, and it's little stuff. But if we get our numbers up on subscriptions, it makes it a little bit easier for more people to find us and enjoy the show and join the community along with us. Speaking of community, I think the best place to go for this is Facebook because we found that that's where the most interaction is. If you've not been over to the our not website, but our Facebook page, you should go over there. It's more or less a community. There's been fun stuff posted. Tony just posted this insane Master of the Universe. I don't even know where he found that, but it was incredible. But if you head over there, it's great to be on that side of it. We're also on Twitter, maybe some Instagram love. We're there for you. If you have a chance, check them out. With that being said, Tony, is there anything else you want to add before we close this bad boy out?
No, just keep listening because I'm telling you right now, we're starting to get into fall of 1993. There's going to be a lot more people involved in our stories that we're going to, we only tell good stuff. We don't tell all the nasty stuff, but it's going to be kind of fun. And we got a lot of good big movies coming out in 1993 still. And, of course the years that are going to follow. So please keep listening to us.
There you go. And we thank you guys very much. Thanks for listening. I and Tony will see or hear or talk to you next episode.
Bye.